am Dr. Amit Bhattacharya from Ramjas College, Department of Zoology, University of Delhi. So I will be presenting a lecture on the cellular processes and overview. Now in this part of the lecture, I will be talking about what exactly the cells are, why do we live, how they coordinate with one another, what are the metabolic processes and the pathways which happens within them, and how these pathways are helping us to structure ourselves in the necessities for the life. Now the cellular metabolism is basically a very complex set of chemical reactions that enables the cells, the living cells, to extract the energy and the other necessities for life from nutrients and to build the new structure it needs to live and reproduce. Now the living cells have got a very high level of complexity within them. So the cytoplasm and the various organelles, it contains a thousands of distinct macromolecules and the micromolecules and the metabolites that function in a very coordinated and timely way to interact among themselves. Now these particular things brings about various functioning of the cell, like for example cell proliferation, cell signaling, how the cell signals within itself and with one another, then the autophagy, then the necrosis process, and how the other processes happen. So it is a very interesting thing to know about these particular cellular processes. Now as we know, cell is the basic unit of life and it is the smallest organized unit of a living organism. Now this cell is basically a simplest collections of matters that can live, and they are related by their descendants from the earlier cells. Now if we see the picture over here, this shows the various cell types which are shown in the images over here. The cells which can be seen over here, the onion cells can be seen, and how exactly these cells are covered, structured from one another with the help of the plasma membranes. Now why exactly the cellular organization among these cells are important? Now the human body is made up of many kinds of cells, and each of them are specific and specialized to function a particular function. For example, the cardiac cell, which are functioning for the cardiac processes, then the renal cells, which are functioning in the kidney and for the extraction of the urine and other processes. Then comes the various hormones, the signaling molecules. So there are different parts of the body which take care of a task to keep itself functional, and all these parts work in a very harmonious and a synchronized way so that all the life processes moves about smoothly. Now if we see the picture over here, this diagram shows in a one diagram how the different parts of the cells are involved in the various biochemical and the physiological processes. For example, if we see over here, the glycolysis pathway is happening, then in the mitochondria the electron transport chain is happening, then the Krebs cycle is happening. So all these things, all these organelles and the cytoplasm, they are having a specialized location where these biochemical reactions are occurring, and subsequently all the body parts have got a specialized cell which function in that particular specialized way. Now before moving into the structuring of these things, we should understand the difference, the basic difference between the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. So there are basically two major types of cells, which are prokaryotes and the eukaryotes, and the prokaryotes contains the bacteria and the archaea, while the eukaryotes consist of the animals and the plant cells and the other cells. Now over here, if we see the key difference between both the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. So in the prokaryotes, the nucleus is absent, while in the eukaryotes the nucleus is present. The typical diameter of the cell in the prokaryotes is very small, it's about 1 micrometer, while in the eukaryotes it's 10 to 100 micrometer over there. Cytoskeleton is absent in the prokaryote, it's present in the eukaryotes. Then the DNA content is higher in the case of the eukaryotes, and in the DNA in the eukaryotes is contained in a specialized molecule which are called as the chromosomes, and in specialized organelles which are called as the nucleus over there, while in the case of the prokaryotes it is a single cellular DNA molecule which is present over there. So if we understand that both of them are different from one another, the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes, and how exactly these functioning difference occurs over there. So we will be focusing and discussing more about the eukaryotic cells and what are the various organelles which are present within the eukaryotic cells over there. Now if we see over here, the two important principal differences between the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes are shown over here, which we just discussed in the previous slide. Now this slide shows about the lineage or the evolution of the cells which are the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes over there. So it all started from the first cell and how the two descendants moved out and formed the specialized cell in the two directions over there. Now this particular slide shows the size of the various cells and the atoms. So it all starts with the atoms, then moves to the macromolecules like the lipids, proteins, then the DNA, the chromosomes, the ribosomes, then the prokaryotic cell, finally the eukaryotic cells like the frog cells, chicken, egg, and like this one. So how the size of the cells increases, it is shown in this particular picture over there. Now the prokaryotic cells are characterized by some of the important features. So they don't have nucleus, the DNA is unbound, present in an unbound way, so it is present in a nucleus over there. So there is no membrane bound organelles which are present, and the cytoplasm bound by the plasma membrane over there. So this is a basic electron micrograph of a bacillus which is shown over there. So this is a TEM electron micrograph image which is shown over here. So we can see over here the bacterial chromosomes over there, the flagella is there, and the outer plasma membrane is there, and nucleoid and absence of any specialized organelles which is present in these particular things. Now in the eukaryotic cells, they are characterized by having the DNA is present in the nucleus and it is bound by a membranous nuclear envelope, and the DNA is further condensed into certain specialized structures which are called as the chromosomes. Now the membrane bound organelles are present in these ones, which are very important in the functioning of the various biochemical pathways within the cell. The cytoplasm is basically the region which is between the plasma membrane and the nucleus, and many of the important biochemical pathways are functioning in this particular cytoplasm. So this is an animal cell which is shown over here. So we can see the nucleus which is there, which has got the nuclear envelope, nucleolus, chromatin which is there, then the various organelles which are there, like the rough endoplasmic reticulum is there, then the cytoskeletons are there which contains the microfilaments, intermediate filaments, microtubules which are there, then the Golgi apparatus, lysosomes, mitochondria. So the various membrane bound organelles can be found in the eukaryotic cells over there. Now this is a plant cell which is shown over here. The major difference is the presence of the chloroplast which is there, and there are plasmodespata which are there, which helps each of the cell to communicate with the adjacent cells over there. Now if we see structure out the various levels of organization within us, so it all starts with the atoms, atoms then forms the molecules, molecules to the macromolecules, organelles which are formed, which are the membrane bound organelle which is shown over here, then they form a cell. So various organelles forms into a cell, the number of cells forms into a tissue, and the tissue forms a organ. So the organ shown which is over here is a kidney organ. So we can see that the tissues and the cells are basically the renal cells, and a number of organelles then forms into an organ system, and these organ system, when they combine into, they form a organism. So this is a level of cellular organization which is happening and starting from the atom level to the organism level over here. Now one of the important pictures which is shown over here, this is a microscopic structure of a villus of the wall of the small intestine which is shown over here. So if we see over here, the villus are shown over there. If we zoom into that one, each of the cells are shown over there, and within those cells there are DNA which is their specialized organelles which are there, which is functioning. So this particular level shows the level of the cellular and the molecular organization which is happening within the small intestine also. Now there is a very important theory which is there, which is called as the endosymbiotic theory. Now this endosymbiotic theory, it refers to how exactly these mitochondria and the chloroplast within the plant cells, they came into the existence. So it is being said that The first event of the endosymbiotic, it occurred when a ancient eukaryotic cell, it engulfed a aerobic bacteria within them, and subsequently it formed into a mitochondria over there. Now, the second important endosymbiotic event that occurred, so where there is a photosynthetic bacterium which got engulfed into the cell, and subsequently the modern photosynthetic eukaryotic cells which are formed over there. So this is a theory which was given way back in 1905 and 1910 by the Russian botanist over there, and it shows that how the origin of the eukaryotic cell came into the picture from the prokaryotic organisms, and it was a evolutionary theory which was proposed and which is called as the endosymbiotic theory or symbiogenesis, which is called over there. Now, why exactly the metabolic pathways are important to us? Within the cell, the metabolic pathways plays a very important role because they help in the metabolism. Now, what exactly is metabolism? So, metabolism is an overall process through which the living organism acquires and utilizes the energy to carry out the various functions within them. So, these metabolic processes are basically a chain of consecutive enzymatic reactions in which one enzymatic reaction leads to the formation of a product which becomes the substrate for the second enzymatic reaction, and the second enzymatic reaction product now becomes the product substrate for the third enzyme. So there is a sequence of the consecutive enzymatic reactions which occurs. So these metabolic processes are governed by these enzymatic reaction. Apart from that, there are various signaling pathways which are there, which helps the metabolic process to understand when exactly to stop and when exactly to initiate or start itself. So there is a very coordinated and synchronized functioning of all these metabolic reactions which occurs within the cell. Now, the cell metabolism, it covers the various different steps and the sequences of molecular conversions which occur. Now, as I told you, there is a synchronized series of biochemical reactions where a product of one conversions become the substrate for the another reaction, and it is called as the metabolic pathway. Now, there are various nutrients which are there, which includes the glucose, amino acids, fatty acid, and they are the fundamental for the energy productions, homeostasis, and the growth of the human cell. So these are a very important major nutrients which are playing a major role in this one. So we will take up this topic in the next part of the lecture, in which we will be discussing about how exactly these function and how the degradation and the formation of these particular major nutrients occurs over there. Now, these enzymatic reactions occurs within the body, and we know that in the enzymatic reaction there is a substrate plus enzyme reaction which combines to form a enzyme substrate complex. So this enzyme substrate complex is a forward reaction which, if not feasible, it can reverse back to form back the substrate and free the enzyme over there. If the conditions are applicable, so it moves in a forward reaction, so the enzyme forms the product, and that's how the enzyme enzyme product formation takes place over there. Now, this reaction is equation is many a times called as Michaelis-Menten equation of enzyme kinetics. So this is a enzyme kinetic reactions which occurs within the body. Now, the metabolic reactions have been broadly classified into two major classes. One is called as the catabolic processes, the other one is called as the anabolic processes. Now, if we see over here the catabolic processes, so there is a degradation or breakdown of the large molecule which is taking place over there. So this is called as the catabolic process. Now, these processes releases the energy. So these energy are then subsequently used by the cells to function itself and moves in a synchronized way. Now, the other part of the reactions are called as the anabolic reaction. So in the anabolic reactions, what we know is these macro and the micronutrients, they combine to one another to form the larger molecules. So there is a synthesis of the larger molecules. For example, glucose and glucose, a number of glucose, they combine in a chain and a sequential reaction to form the starch molecule or the glycogen molecule like this one. And when the breakdown takes place, so this glycogen is broken down into the monomer of the glucose, so that particular reaction is called as the catabolic reaction. So in the catabolic reaction there is a release of the energy, and the larger molecules are broken down into the smaller, simpler molecules, while in the anabolic reaction there is a energy consumption which takes place. So the smaller units, they combine to form the larger units over there. Now if we see the overall pathways of reactions which occurs within the cell, the carbohydrates, proteins and the fats in the initial level, they get broken down or digested or absorbed into simple sugars, amino acids, fatty acids and the glycerol. And then within the body, the catabolic reactions takes place. So they are all funneled into the various catabolic chain reactions where they form the acetyl-CoA, and this acetyl-CoA then get into the citric acid cycle for complete combustion and complete reaction process, where the carbon dioxide and water molecules are released. Along with that, there are energy molecules which are released over there in the form of the ATP molecule. Now if we see this particular metabolic pathway, cake metabolic pathways which is happening within the cell, it gives the impression something like a microprocessor. So we can see over here, this is the reference pathway in which all the pathways have been interconnected to one another, where they are connected. So there are nodes, internodes which are there. So we can see in this particular pathway reaction, the various metabolic reactions are being shown, like the lipid metabolism is shown, carbohydrate metabolism is shown, amino acid metabolism is shown, how there is a formation of the steroids which is taking place. So we can see over here all the reactions are combined over here, while in the central part of the reaction, if we see, there is a circular metabolic pathway, reference pathway which is shown over here. So that circular pathway is basically the Krebs cycle or the tricarboxylic cycle which we just discussed, in which all these smaller molecules, they funnel into for the complete oxidation over there. Now these are some of the light micrograph images of the representation of the plant cells which are shown over here. So we can see these particular cells, they are covered and they are structured into a proper formation, specialized cell with the help of the plasma membranes. Then these are some of the cells which are showing the representative animal cells which are shown over here. So we can see the nucleus which is there, the well formed cellular structures which are there. Now each of these cellular cell molecules are covered by a cell membrane. So this cell membrane plays a very important part in the cellular processes and the metabolic reactions also, because these particular cell membranes, they help or they cover the cell and make them they protected from one another. Apart from that, within them there are presence of various integrated molecules or the proteins which are there, which acts as a channel or the tunnel through which there is an exchange of the ions and the various water soluble molecules takes place. Now this cell membranes are basically classified as the lipid bilayer which is there. So it is largely made up of phospholipids over there. So we can see over here the phospholipids. There is a hydrophobic polar head of the phospholipid which is shown over there, and there is a hydrophilic fatty acid tail of the phospholipid which is shown over there. Apart from that, there are presence of various integral proteins and the surface proteins which are there. So we can see over here there are two layers of the lipids which are there. That's why it is called as the lipid bilayer over there. Now this lipid bilayer have got various different membrane transport molecules which are there. So different types of the membrane transports which are there, which is the simple diffusion transport molecules which are there, where there is a simple diffusion of the ions or the water soluble molecule takes place across the cell membrane. Then there is a felicitated diffusion which is there. So the molecules are transported with the help of the specialized transporter protein molecules which are there. Then there is a primary active transport which takes place, which requires energy for the transportation over there. So this particular image is showing the different types of membrane transport which are taking place across the membrane of the cells, and how the one cell and the other cell are interconnected, and how they connect with one another. Now, within these particular cell, there are specialized specific structures which are there, which are many a times referred as the organelles. So organelles are basically the subcellular structure that has one or more specific job to perform in this cell, like for example the nuclei, which stores the genetic information like the DNA or the chromosome, the mitochondria, which is involved in the produce the chemical reactions in the form of the ATP molecule, the ribosomes, which assembles the proteins and helps in the process of protein, the translation process over there. Now, if we see this particular electron micrograph, the single cell, the various organelles are shown over there. So there is Golgi complex, which is there, endoplasmic reticulum, which is there, plasma membrane is there, then there is the lysosomes which are there, then the mitochondria is there. So all these cell organelles, they function in a coordinated and synchronized way and in a harmony, so that the cell survives and moves in a particular reactions easily. Now, the mitochondria is one of the most important membrane bound cell organelles which is present, and it is involved in the generation or the production of chemical energy which powers the cell for the various biochemical reaction. Now, the mitochondria is a membrane bound cell organelle. So we can see there is an outer membrane, then there is an inner membrane which is there, and within the inner membrane there is a matrix which is present. Now, these particular matrix and the inner mitochondrial membrane have got various specialized pathways which are there, which helps in the chemical energy synthesis which are needed to power these cells for the various biochemical reactions. Now, in this particular image, these cellular energy metabolism is shown over here. So we can see over here there is in the cytoplasm, the glucose is broken down into the pyruvate by the process of glycolysis. Then the pyruvate moves into the tricarboxylic acid cycle, where there is a complete combustion, and subsequently the electron transport chain uses these particular electrons to form the ATP molecules by producing the water molecule over there with the help of the half of oxygen. So in this part of the lecture, I discussed about the basics of the cell, what are the cellular metabolisms, and why exactly we require these cellular processes and metabolism, and how exactly these are important for the cell. So in the next part, we will discuss about these organelles and some of the important macronutrients which are present within these particular cells, which helps in the biochemical reaction. So thank you very much to listening to this talk. Thank you.